Hey, welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring, great companies. Companies that will last, companies that people will be proud of, companies that will endure and that will be able to sustain the long-weathered storms that the world seems to always throw at us. Today, I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence from Vancouver, Canada. G'day, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Great, Brad. I'm looking forward to the show as I always do. I like our chats we have beforehand, getting ready for what we're going to discuss on our show today. So yeah, I'm doing great.
Awesome. And as always, we like to start with a word or a phrase of the day. What might you have for us today?
No, mine is refreshed. Just because I've been, taking the advice from my own book, your oxygen mask first, and having some recovery time over the last couple of weeks, and just came back from a weekend at the spa. There's a spa resort near us here up in the Okanagan, a place called Sparkling Hills. So had a couple days there just to recover and relax and hang out in the pools and just lots of great time in nature and relaxing, which is good. Feel energized and getting excited about taking on some new projects.
Awesome.
That's me. How about you, Brad?
Probably the opposite of that. Mine is profit per X.
Awesome.
And really just contemplating how over the years, like 10, 20 years, profit per X as a simple central concept that we work with so often with clients has evolved. And, the more that we understand it, the deeper our understanding is, the more nuances kind of uncover themselves. So the first time that you or I might have read about profit per X could have been in the 90s or the early 2000s. Yep. And just over that 20-year period, how much depth and nuance has grown into that.
So a bit of a refresh around profit per X. That's right, huh? You were there. Good one.
Excellent.
And just so those of you that are listening know, we don't plan the word of the day in advance. It just kind of comes out. So that's all freestyle. Happened to work today.
Yes, it is. It is. I need to make a mental note to set you up one day.
Yeah.
With two words that can't be joined together.
Yes.
All right. So today we're talking about why strategy should focus on producing more profit, not market share.
We could almost call it why market share should be a dirty word in your boardroom.
But isn't that what we want to do? Don't we want to grow market share in our company? Don't we want to grow? I thought we were called the Growth Whisperers.
Exactly. Unfortunately, when a lot of people focus on growing market share, it's just like less experienced CEOs and leaders that chase revenue. And there's a place for market share, but it's a very specific place. But at a macro level, chasing market share is normally a fool's game. Because normally, just like when you chase sales, you make a whole bunch of bad choices because you have such a volume focus versus a quality focus. So almost a quantity obsession versus a quality obsession. And if we know enduring great businesses generally have a lot of quality of people, quality of process, and quality of their profits and cash flow. So I think market share often is misunderstood. And I think it's a dirty word, in many cases, an amateur's word. It's an amateur perspective because they don't realize the cost of chasing market share in many cases, although not all.
Yeah. I mean, the job of a leadership team is to develop a strategy and execute that strategy that theoretically should produce better returns than the industry average.
Yes, that shows that they're smart and they're running their business well or planning their business well.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, sometimes people take concepts that would work in a very, very large business and apply it to a small or medium business, and it doesn't translate. Again, it depends on the strategy, it depends on the industry dynamics. But the root of it is, with all of the clients we work with, we want them to build great businesses. And sometimes they get caught up in the large business focus and wanting to to get massive. And they think that being big is consistent with being great. But the challenge is being big is just big. Usually there's this saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I.e., if you're not smart on how you build it, you can build a big wobbly business.
That isn't profitable.
Correct.
That isn't profitable. And if it's kind of built without a strong foundation. Yes, maybe you acquired 20 people in the industry and you've got great size, but is there any, if we look from the customer's perspective, is there any reason apart from your size why I should come to you and not go to the nimble place up the road who meets my needs better?
Correct. And that's the idea is, now I'll make a case against what we're saying, but there is a point when you could chase market share and it could be a brilliant move. That's in a very specific niche that you have a sustainable competitive advantage and big juicy margins, right? Or at least you're so efficient that you get big profitability on the business that you do, substantial profitability, in percentage terms. And there are places like that. Those are pocket pools, but generally people chase it as a macro strategy versus a micro strategy. So if you're in an industry that normally runs, 32% gross margin and 10%, net income or EBITDA, and you find a little honey hole where you can get 52% gross margin and 23% EBITDA, go nuts. Chase that as long as you have a sustained competitive advantage. But most people just say, well, we got to get market share. And they chase market share without doing the profit calculations and ensuring that they're going to get to keep the business because they have some sort of sustainable advantage.
Here's the killer question. Okay. If you or someone in your leadership team says we should acquire or aim to grow more market share, the answer or the qualifying question should be, how will that help us to improve profit percentage or net profit percentage?
Or profit per X. Yes.
Yeah.
So if we do a waterfall graph of our most profitable business through to our least profitable, if it's related to our most profitable business, let's go. But generally, people miss analyzing the profitability of that market share they're gonna chase.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why an enterprise that's doing a few $100 million, and then I'll use EBITDA and just for the example, and doing 12% EBITDA, they wonder why it creeps down to 9 over time. When they get up to 300 or 400 million, they're doing 9% EBITDA. It was because they mismanaged the business. They chased market share, i.e. volume business, i.e. often more commodity, lower priced business or lower profitability business. Because they got caught, and it's hard. We're not saying this is easy, but generally the greatest businesses are very profitable and they do everything in their power not to take on unprofitable business and to make sure that they price differently so that they can stay profitable on all the business they do.
And if you've got a competitor who's chasing market share, that's one of the best competitors to have, because suddenly you can look and say, who are the best, most profitable customers that we can target and meet their needs better than they are? Because they only care about market share. We can take the profitable customers, and that's why they go from 12 to 9 or 9 to 5 or whatever it is.
Yes.
Percent
The
of EBITDA.
challenge is in a lot of the cases, if you are not really clear on your strategy, you can get stuck into this market share mindset because you're not smart, or you don't have a smart enough strategy to look at it from a competitive advantage point of view.
Yeah.
And that's, and generally, so one of our, our key points here is that market share is the path to health, usually commodity health, if you're not careful. It's a very, now again, if you're a massive scale business, you could be playing a different game. But for most people, the uneducated pursuit of market share, if you're not looking at it through the lens of profitability, can be really, really dangerous, because next thing you know, all your business is in that same mindset of chasing the market share, but not getting the juicy profit. And all it means is you should be having, or maybe not you, somebody needs to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do we better meet our customers' needs and get premium pricing because we have a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Do something meaningful in a way that the customer is thrilled that we exist and willing to pay for it.
Most industries, most products produce something relatively similar, a good or a service, at around about the same price. So the job of strategy is to find a unique and valuable position that creates more profit compared to the competition. So you can do that only two ways. Either A, you pick out the customers where you can meet their need better and they're prepared to pay more profit because you're going to meet that need better. And therefore you can charge a premium for your service. And that's what most small to medium businesses with high profits are doing, because they don't have the economies of scale to do the other way, which is you can take out some of the things that people don't value, and then you can charge less than the industry average and still make a significant profit. And that's why the tech industry has been so very successful, because they look at the typical business model and they say, where's the fat? Where is the things that we don't need to
Where
pay
can we
for?
cut out a layer, a middleman or middle person, a distributor level, whatever it is, they cut out something to reduce the costs and reduce the price.
Yep, that's it. And yet still make more profit.
Yep.
They're creating a unique and valuable position that's different from the competition.
Yeah. So again, to kind of where we're at here is that market share is a place that if you're going to chase it, you better do it eyes wide open and know what the heck you're doing. And doing more volume of low profitable business, you can take and build a $250 million business at 3%, and you're making something. There's dollars there. There's more dollars than when you're at 200 million or 100 million. But that's also a very hard business to sustain if the industry average profitability is in the 8% or 9%. It's hard to sustain because you're not going to have enough cash to put back into the business, to reinvest into things like innovation or whatever it is that you need to do to stay competitive. So if you're kind of skimming the bottom, so again, the root of it is, if you're chasing volume, or when you're chasing volume, you need to be chasing the juiciest volume. And the only way you can do that well is to have a really good strategy so that you're competitive, customers love you, and are happy to pay either a premium to do business with you, or because of your unique approach, you can do it at a lower price, but also using a lower cost base to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. One of my clients I worked with in the US had a big focus on this. It was interesting. We never ever talked market share. We didn't even talk revenue. It was very like literally the company crossed $1 billion in revenue, and we almost missed it. It's an interesting number to cross, but we never even talked about it ever. We talked about gross margin and EBITDA. And everything was gross margin, which is the money we make, after a transaction is done at a transaction level, and EBITDA, what sticks after we apply our overheads. So we would, and they grew incredibly because that's all we were focused on. And the CEO again and again and again was saying, hey, we've got to be out there finding creative ways to save our clients money. They were in a business where they did save their clients money by their offering, because they were sort of a outsourced solution.
Yeah.
And they were constantly solve a customer problem, save them money. And that they could do that in very, very profitable ways. But they constantly were looking at profitability, gross margin and profitability. And then the volume came. More customers came, but never market share, never revenue.
So you've just given two separate scenarios. One was a team who's producing 3%. I don't want to know what the second team was producing, but it's above 3%. A lot more than 3%. A lot more. So let's go back to the definition I said before. The job of the leadership team is to produce and enact a strategy that, is the highest return on investment or capital investment, the highest return on capital invested in the business that's possible by by developing and enacting that strategy. So therefore, the second leadership team were much more successful by virtue than the first, because they're getting a much higher return.
Yes, and because the CEO was very strategic and they were obsessed with creating customer value. And in their market, because there was the people they were competing against were established, big, slow, and expensive. They were not small, but smaller, nimble, and very creative. And so that they provided a notably better, they provided an excellent solution for their customers and can make spectacular profit. But interestingly, by the way, they could have made much more profit, but they didn't try and squeeze everything out of the orange. They left some there because they wanted to grow and continue to scale the business. Mm-hmm. So they got very, very good returns, but there could have been more, but because of their growth aspirations, they didn't want to run the business too tight.
Yeah.
But it was an excellent business. Yeah. So and the root of all of this is that, when you're going into a meeting, is that and you're planning for your next year, it's to be thinking about strategy, differentiation, and growth through that lens versus market share and how do we compete with our competitors hand to hand and getting into price wars and silly things like that.
Yeah. So a nice, simple question to ask the leadership team is, are they thinking about 10xing the revenue or 10xing the profit? So when you think about the future, think 10 years away or 15 years away or whatever it is, what comes to mind? Is it the revenue number will be much larger or the profit number will be much larger? Now, a nuance to that is you could put in there the profit per X, subject that we've discussed previously, or the profit per unit or whatever it is, the profit per X that we use for the business. But if you think about our profit will be 10 times larger than it is today in 10 or 15 years, it gets you to think about a whole range of activities that are perhaps not profitable or not ideal. When you think, how are we going to get 10 times the profit in 10 years? It's a whole different range of activities. And that's what we're encouraging people to focus on today.
Yes. So a couple of questions like you suggested, but another couple of questions that sort of in addition to what you suggested, Brad, would be is, how can we get our customers gladly paying 25% more?
Yeah.
Picking a number, right? Or how at the same price can we deliver what we're doing at 25% less cost? Right? And really thinking about that, what would we need to do? Right? Or what other problems do our customers have that we could solve? Zooming up to a higher level, right?
Yeah.
And there's other strategic questions, but really to open up your mind towards creating more value. Another one is, how can we double the value we create for our customers? How can you look into their systems and their supply chain and what they're doing and offer additional solutions that would help to streamline that and save them or make them more money inside their own business? And now you're really thinking strategically. And I've seen some amazing models of what people have done. And I saw some great stuff that we did in retail, where you put the hat of the customer being, in this case, it was a brand, and what does that brand need and how can we better provide that for them? And as a result, coming up with different models and ways to lock up their business and drive more revenue for them. So lots of examples, but we want to keep our mind on competitive advantage, solving problems that the customers are thrilled to pay for in some way. And again, staying out of that darn commodity hell.
Yeah. And so next week, we're going to talk about the 8 common strategy mistakes that people make. And so I guess it's kind of a part 2 onto this one. But yeah, we're thinking, this is about avoiding commodity hell, stopping thinking about growing revenues. And so we're really going to talk about the strategy mistakes that people make. But back to this episode. So we need to be thinking about widget growth at the same time. So yes. So whilst we've really stressed today that we need to grow our profits, what we're trying to do is compound the profit growth as well as the unit growth, or the quantity of things, that goods or services that we sell. But not only focusing on that second one, the goods or services, we're trying to get a compounding impact there.
Yeah, I had a conversation with the CEO this week, and their profit growth has been excellent, but their unit growth has not, meaning that they're making more money off their existing customers, which is outstanding.
Yeah.
But at some point, if the growth engine itself, in terms of units, is not growing, your growth won't sustain. You can only get that extra margin and extra profit for so long. And until that stops, and then you'll be flat, and sometimes you can decline because the new business engine has stopped. Interestingly, what we talked about for this CEO, because they've done it lots in the past, but is keeping the new client, the new logo acquisition forefront in their reporting and their goals.
Yeah.
And this happens to a lot of companies. They, even if they're focused incredibly well on profitability growth and all that good stuff, you still need to manage the unit growth, and it easily fades because the whole team slips more into account management than landing of new accounts or business development.
That's so funny. About a year ago, I took a call from a CEO. And well, he was a former CEO. Now he was the chairman of the board or main shareholder. And so he was a little bit beside himself because he said, look, he had stepped out successfully, and they decided to appoint the CFO, the chief financial officer, into the CEO role, to basically run the business.
I've been to this movie.
Yeah. And he said, that was 2 or 3 years ago. I hadn't spoken to this guy in that time. And he said, so it's great that I've stepped out. And he said, it's a family business. So the family sits back and they're loving the fact that the profit grew. He said, we've never made as much profit as we have now. But
for how many months? Yeah.
Well, that profit was, I would say, 2 to 3 years. Yeah. He said the dollar profit has been unbelievable. We couldn't get our head around that this business could make that much profit. But he said there's been this sense of dread that started to step into the family because the revenue has gone backwards.
Shocking.
For that, yeah, it's gone back about 5 to 10% every year over the last 10 years. And he said, so yeah, we're making more profit, but as business people, we know this is not a good story. Like, it's not going to end well.
Because they got caught up in optimizing. It's a very common scenario. Streamlining, optimizing, cutting unnecessary cost, but then you kill the growth engine or you kill the value prop, one of the two, whatever, it happens all the time.
Yeah, they switch off the strategy, they switch off any.
Yeah, they kill the competitive advantage.
Yep.
And they just milk it and until there's nothing left to milk.
Yeah. It's the dry cow scenario. Awesome. Yep. So we need to ensure to circle back. We've got to make sure that we will plan to grow unit growth as well as profit. But the primary question, as we said earlier, is let's ensure that we're focusing not on growing revenue, but instead focusing on growing profit, and then asking the subsequent questions.
Growing the honey holes in market share, not the macro market share. Growing in the places that we're strongest, have a sustainable competitive advantage, and then generally we get paid for that. Never mind the fact that we're building loyal long-term customer relationships versus ones where if we don't have a great advantage, they might easily go somewhere else. Awesome. I love this one. Whenever people start talking about market share, Brad, I get fired up. I'm like, you need to probably learn a few things and be and sometimes they really do know their stuff, but you got to be very smart and sophisticated if you're going to start to try and chase market share. It's a very, very tricky game. All right, well, thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad, and I'm Kevin. For the video version, go to youtube.com and search for the Growth Whisperers. For Brad, evolutionpartners.com.au, and for myself, lawrenceandco.com. Hope you have an amazing week. Stay out of commodity hell and chase the honey holes of competitive advantage. Have a great one.